Last May, I uploaded a video called Max Talks About Things and Doesn't Shut Up, Carnival, Drag Balls, and Queer Identity for my Theater and Culture 1 class, a hypothetical pilot to a series of videos where I get 5 minutes to discuss whatever I want. And since you all liked it so much, I figured I would continue the series with episode 2 for my Theater and Culture 2 class. For my Theater and Culture 1 final, I spent months banging my head against a wall trying to figure out how we could historiographically discuss a topic that was purposely targeted by the Catholic Church. My challenge was, how could I imagine this happening when we don't have the sources to prove what did happen and what did not happen because of all the censorship? So imagine my relief when, for my Theater and Culture 2 class, I was told I could research anything I wanted so long as it related to some aspect of performance.
Wait a minute, did you say anything?
Anything.
Anything?
Yes, anything.
Anything?
Anything.
Anything?
I'll get you, and I'll look like a bloody accident.
Right away, I had this grand idea for a video, an idea that I had been thinking about since my junior year of high school, that I had never been given the platform or the opportunity to discuss until now. So naturally, the topic of this video is... Now, I've had the opportunity to see The Phantom of the Opera 3 times now, going for a fourth before it closes in March. But Phantom was one of those shows when the first time I saw it, I didn't even realize it was over until it ended. It was one of those shows that kept me on the edge of my seat because of all the intricate details of the set, or the chilling melodies of the music, or the fantastic spectacle of all the pyrotechnics or the falling chandelier. But the more you see a show, the more you start to realize different details that you didn't notice before. And by the third time I saw it, I was like, yo, is it just me, or is this show like a little f***ed up? Don't get me wrong, The Phantom of the Opera is still one of my favorite shows of all time, but putting the Fantasia aside, the way that Christine Daae is treated throughout the show, not only by the Phantom, but by the men who run the Palais Garnier, is disgusting. Despite Christine Daae being the new and up-and-coming prima donna of the opera, she is merely a product in the eyes of these men. Her voice is what sells, and furthermore, up until Poor Fool He Makes Me Laugh, they didn't even want to replace the old prima donna, Carlotta, with Christine. In the theater business world, it doesn't necessarily matter what you have to offer, it matters who you are, and Christine Daae was a nobody before the Phantom made her. And while she is the object of affection for both Raoul de Chagny and the Phantom, one starts to question where that affection lies based on the behaviors of Christine's character. Christine has little to no agency in Andrew Lloyd Webber's musical, but even still, the musical is better than the novel, because at least she is the main character in the musical. The novel focuses more on Raoul's obsession with Christine and this obsession with her innocent image. I want to argue that this story is meant to be a metaphor for domestic abuse, both the novel and the musical. Only in Andrew Lloyd Webber's version did he give his female characters any sort of agency over their actions, even if that agency is limited under the manipulation of the Phantom. The clock starts now. So the musical starts after the story, where an older Raoul de Chagny is at an auction for the opera house and sees this little monkey music box and starts to have war flashbacks. Essentially, his wife, Christine Daae, started her career at the Palais Garnier as a dancer, but was discovered to be an overnight sensation. There are rumors of a ghost haunting the Palais Garnier, but everyone has their opinion on it. Most people are skeptical, but nevertheless, strange things happen at the opera house all the time. Raoul, touched by Christine's performance, goes on to tell her how much he adores her, and she's like, thanks, I'm literally taught by an angel. Daddy Eric appears in the mirror and whisks her away to an underground catacomb where he sings to her on a boat. She sees his face and is like, damn, you ugly. And he's like,
don't call me. Don't come by my house. We're done.
As the story goes on, the managers assign Carlotta to sing the role of Marguerite in Faust. The Phantom is like,
bitch, I hope the fuck you do!
And makes the chandelier fall. Raoul and Christine confess their love to one another, which makes the Phantom mad. At one point, they're at Christine's father's graves, and fire shoots out of the stage. It's like this whole thing. But it's all okay in the end because Christine kisses the Phantom, and suddenly he understands that he can't just kidnap and murder people. While the bulk of the plot is similar, the novel is presented in a different order than the sequence of events that occurs in the musicals. Furthermore, the only major similarity is the chandelier falling, and it is based on a real-life case that happened at the Palais Garnier in 1896. And even the real-life event, the entire chandelier did not fall from the ceiling. One of the counterweights broke from a fire, and the counterweight is what fell from the ceiling. The novel begins with the death of Joseph Buquet, who Leroux doesn't really give us any information about. In a typical Parisian manner, everyone forces themselves to forget about what happened with Joseph Buquet because thinking on death means ruining merriment and joy, which means acknowledging the presence of the Phantom. We'll come back to this later. As a side note, Leroux tried to insert himself into the story as a semi-omniscient narrator, semi-detective trying to solve the case of Philippe de Chagny, because the whole novel is a build-up to the death of Raoul's brother. But Leroux is somewhat unreliable because in the introduction of his novel, he sets this story up as if he was there. If it were a true story, how would Leroux even know about what was going on between these private moments between Christine and Raoul, or Christine and the Phantom, unless everybody had a knowledge of what was going on and nobody said anything. We'll come back to that later. The way in which Leroux builds his characters is disturbingly real, playing on the idea of what is good, what is evil, what is love, and what is abuse. The Phantom is a manipulator, quite literally, as he knows how to manipulate reality since he lived in a freak show for years. But also, the Phantom knows how to psychologically manipulate people as well. We see this with his control over the theater, by him sending letters, by him making things happen, aka the chandelier falling, people dying, people being hung. And while his hold is over the entire Palais Garnier, and not just Christine alone, we see in the novel that the women suffer the abuse of his manipulations the worst. According to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men experience severe intimate partner physical violence, with 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men experiencing physical violence. Emotional or psychological abuse is defined by the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence as involving trauma to the victim caused by verbal abuse, acts, threat of acts, or coercive tactics, including but not limited to controlling what the victim can and can't do, isolating the victim from their family and friends, gaslighting, and stalking. Oh look, the Phantom does all of that! And yet, in the novel, it is clear that Christine feels torn between her love for Raoul and the love for the Phantom. Why, if the Phantom treats Christine so poorly, does she pity him? Why does she stay with him? I mean, after Christine rips off his mask, the Phantom physically assaults her and berates her, yet she chooses to stay with him and pretend to love him for a month on end. This is because psychological abusers make it so their victims don't want to leave, or they can't leave. Christine, in the wake of her father's death, has a grieving mind that is vulnerable to manipulation. And here comes this mysterious, enchanting voice in her dressing room, claiming he is the angel of music her father sent to her, and she has to hold on to that, because that's the only connection she has left to her father. We see this beautifully illustrated in the musical through the song Wishing You Were Somehow Here Again, but in the book, without that actual music present, we are only left to see how the psychological abuse wears and tears on her character. He swears that he is her friend, under terms and conditions, that she is to never take off his mask, that she must stay with him and she must sing for him, and she can never marry anyone else. And while the Phantom does not deny Christine of any money, food, or necessary resources to live, the Phantom has still kidnapped Christine and only allows her her liberty if she promises to wear a gold ring and remain spiritually married to him, in possession of him. The way that Christine in the musical is able to escape the situation she's in is through the support of Raoul, who sees the physical and emotional damage that Christine suffers and organizes a plot in order to capture the Phantom by trapping him in the theater during his own opera, which we see in Past the Point of No Return. And although Raoul doesn't believe in the Phantom at the beginning of the play, he is willing to put his literal life on the line to protect Christine. This love triangle, then, is representative of the support victims have to get out of domestic abuse situations. Raoul in the novel is a little bitch. While he never physically assaults Christine, he is just as hyper-obsessed with her as the Phantom is. Here's this girl who he hasn't seen since he was a child, and upon hearing her beautiful, enchanting voice, he is like, I'ma tap that. Raoul participates in the same behavior the Phantom engages in. He follows Christine to her childhood home, first upon her request, but later without any notice, berates her in front of her mother, consistently begs her to run away with him, despite the fact that she tells him she's a married woman. He very often listens into her private conversations in her dressing room, stalking Christine just the same way as the Phantom does. But of course, Christine ends up with Raoul because he's the protagonist of the novel. Although he engages in similar behavior to the Phantom, it's okay because when he's doing it, it's in the name of love, whereas when the Phantom does it, it's obsession and it's creepy and it's weird. Good must triumph over evil in order for a happy ending to happen, right? Well, I don't necessarily think so. Leroux wrote this novel in order to get audiences to think about what is good and what is evil, what is love and what is abuse. I think Leroux's point is that there aren't good guys and bad guys, but rather people who do good things and bad things, and we develop our own opinions based on what we perceive. But there's always another side to the story that we don't perceive, or rather, we could perceive it, we do perceive it, but in the Parisian way, we turn a blind eye in the name of joviality. The real tragedy is that people know what's going on and they don't do anything about it because that goes against the Parisian ideal of having fun and being jovial and being merry, which unfortunately is the case in many abusive relationships. People on the outside know what's going on and don't do anything because they don't want to get involved. Leroux brings the story to the forefront of the reader's knowledge, making us aware of the situation. Therefore asking, what would we do about the situation if we knew what was going on? If you or a loved one has been affected by domestic violence or abuse, please call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 800-799-7233.